Okay, so Leonard Fournette yesterday signed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, my Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Very fun stuff here. I'm a little bit late on the draw on this video. I was on vacation for 2 days, the first vacation I've taken in years, so very fun. And of course, as fate would have it, a bunch of NFL news happened with, Josh Gordon, Stephen Gostkowski, Logan Ryan, a ton of stuff. But you know what? I'm just going to get started. We'll talk about the Leonard Fournette thing, and enough of me just rambling. Let's just get straight into the video. One of the things you'll notice if you watch some tape of Leonard Fournette, probably the first thing you'll notice is how underrated of a receiving back he is. This is a guy who can be a very good receiving back. And, a lot of people talk about the fact that he had over 1,000 rushing yards, but he had over 500 receiving yards as well. So, this is a guy who combined had 1,600 all-purpose yards. There were only 5 players who had more. It was Christian McCaffrey, Ezekiel Elliott, Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, and crazily enough, Michael Thomas had so many receiving yards, he still ended up 5th in all-purpose yards, despite the fact that it wasn't, his overall rushing total was actually -9, which is crazy. But anyways, let's just talk about his how he can be effective in the passing game. And there's really 2 main ways he can be effective. One is just with checkdowns. He's a very good checkdown route runner. And I think a lot of people might not be totally sure what that means. Like, how can you really be good in it? Don't you just basically just run 2 steps and look for a pass? Well, yes and no. There's more to it. Like on this play, what's going to happen is that he's running out to basically what he's going to do is this is a zone coverage. And so because of the zone, with players running further deep, there's a bigger chance that some of these Kansas City players will continue running further deep, meaning there might be sort of a bubble, shallower, where you can hit Fournette, and he'll be underneath all of the other Kansas City players. He can run and pick up 5 yards or so. You also notice that in the middle of Fournette's route, he's going to run into somebody. He's going to basically just help out his offensive lineman, if he can, by sort of moving a defensive lineman over. There's kind of 2 things he's supposed to do here. A, give his offensive lineman some help, and B, get open quickly, because you never know how quickly your quarterback might need to, make a check down. And so watch how he's able to do this, and watch how he does make just a quick, push, nothing much, but then he's very quickly able to get himself in position where if the ball comes his way, he would be ready to make a catch and gain a few yards. Now, Nick Foles isn't going to throw it to him here. In hindsight, maybe he would have liked to, because, he's going to instead hit the tight end who's running out to the flat, but there's a Kansas City player who can get a much better jump on him than typically one of the linebackers would get on Fournette, not to mention, obviously, Fournette's going to be better in open space. Honestly, what he would really like to do is hit his receiver who's running the route, on the bottom of the screen, going to end up right at the 30-yard line. He's going to get very open, but again, in hindsight, it's always easy to say exactly where you should throw. Foles' mindset was always he was going to go to the top of the screen and go deep to shallow, and he didn't like deep, so he's going shallow. He's simplifying the offense for himself, which does make sense. He throws it there. They don't really gain much, but I thought Fournette did a great job on that play, and that's why I'm showing it. He could have gotten wide open, in the middle of the end zone for a touchdown. Foles wasn't going to see him on that play because he had a different mindset, which actually did kind of make sense. But I think it's worth mentioning that he can do a great job of sort of helping his offensive lineman out while still getting open very quickly so he can get those checkdowns. And you know who loves checkdowns? Tom Brady, his new quarterback. So I think that's very interesting to talk about. And I also think he could be very effective in plays like this. This is a screen pass. In Tampa Bay, they like this type of play a lot too, which is why I'm bringing it up. Because what's going to happen is that you have 2 offensive linemen run out to block 2 Kansas City players. A receiver blocks a Kansas City player, and Fournette, who is out wide, takes the catch, runs, and tries to pick up as many yards as possible. There's really 2 ways you can do this, the first of which would be to have one offensive lineman go out to block a Kansas City player, and the other is have 2. If you have both of them do this, it now means that the edge rusher is going to be unblocked on this play, which sometimes isn't a terrible thing. Basically, you just have to get it to your halfback quickly, and he has to get going quickly, but the obvious advantage is an extra blocker downfield, which could give Fournette a ton more yards once he gets downfield. However, it's tougher when the edge rusher is Frank Clark, very smart and aware player. He realizes what's going on right here. He's going to get right in position to try and make a play on Fournette. Fournette has to go up to make the catch too, so not exactly a perfect throw. And now Clark is right in his face trying to make a tackle right here. But watch what Fournette is going to do, and watch how he makes a very quick move to get around Clark, and then he has the speed to run forward and still pick up a solid gain, despite the fact that Clark made a great play to get him in position, and then Fournette gets into, a little bit of a pushing match at the end there, which is always fun. But I just think that's a great example of what he can do in the passing game. Again, I'm not going to sit here and say he's Christian McCaffrey, but he's a very good receiving back, and I think that is something that's worth mentioning, especially in this Tampa Bay offense. Obviously, Bruce Arians was the guy when David Johnson had his best years. He played together, and of course, Tom Brady loves throwing it to halfbacks. So you have to imagine Fournette will get some work in that regard. So why did he get cut? Well, it's honestly kind of confusing. I don't know why. It's to me, I don't fully understand why they literally couldn't get anything. Jacksonville said they couldn't even get a 7th-round pick for him, which is a bit surprising. I mean, part of it is his numbers. You especially look at like 2017, he only averaged 3.9 yards per carry. In 2018, he had less playing time, but he only averaged 3.3 yards per carry, which is terrible. But last year, he had 4.3 yards per carry, over 1,000 yards, and as I said, he had finished 6th in all-purpose yards, 5th among halfbacks. And now I will say, I actually think that despite the fact that he plays for a not very good offensive line, sometimes his numbers can be a bit overinflated, kind of. I guess it's up for debate. It's really debatable. And so I'll just explain what I mean, and then I'll let you make your own decision, kind of, and I still will share my opinion. So this is the way the play is going to work. This is against Denver. They're going to have their center and their right guard double team interior lineman. Center moves up to block the linebacker. You also have a tackle with a one-on-one block on Von Miller. That doesn't always work out well, but it is going to work out well here. Fournette's going to run through that gap. And watch what happens. So this is well blocked. Fournette's easily able to get to the second level. And then he's able to make a move on another Denver player, a Denver defensive back, who's then he's able to run over and pick up just a ton of yards. He's able to continue running down the field, and he turns what could have been just a decent gain into a giant gain. Fournette is fantastic in open space, and Fournette is very good at making a safety miss. There's a reason why his yards per carry sometimes in certain games will be really bad. But then you look at like he'll, in the next game might be really good, and also you notice that like his yards might like seem a little bit high, and then you look at it and realize he had like a 70-yard run in that game or something like that. He's kind of the king of having those types of games where he has a bunch of 2-yard gains and then has one 70-yard gain. There's no better example, in my opinion, than when he played Tennessee on week 3, where he finished the game with 66 yards on 15 attempts, which is a 4.4 yards per carry, pretty solid. Except for the fact that he had a 69-yard run in this game. So his longest run was more than his overall rushing yardage total, and he had 15 carries, which is just, it's the most Leonard Fournette stat ever, because he will have those moments where he gets those big runs because he is so good in open space. And so I think that's up for debate a little bit. On one hand, you could argue, well, those plays don't happen very often, and you'd rather a guy who can get 5 yards consistently than gets 2 yards consistently but will break out the one big run. The flip side, of course, is that, well, hey, if you get one big run, I mean, that does so much for your offense, and that can be a huge game changer, and then other teams have to kind of prepare for that to some degree. Personally, I think I still would rather have the guy who could just be more consistent than sort of the, he's kind of the equivalent of like the left-handed power hitter where he'll strike out a lot, but he'll get a lot of home runs. But you know what? That has a ton of value too. So they're both valuable. It all really just depends on how well do they do their respective thing. But I also don't think that Leonard Fournette is like a garbage runner or anything like that. A big part of why sometimes his yardage totals will be low is because of the offensive line. And when the offensive line blocks well, he tends to do a pretty good job. Like right here, this is the blocking concept. It's going to be, just 3 one-on-one matchups across the board. The center has the most difficult matchup, but he's going to end up doing it pretty well. They get some space for Fournette, and he's able to run through the gap pretty well. I think that maybe my biggest critique of Fournette is he doesn't accelerate as quickly as you might like. That's probably that. His vision's also not always perfect, but he definitely can be a pretty good between the tackles runner, I think. This is an example of, maybe not necessarily a perfect play, but also kind of. I think this is just going to show a couple things here where it's going to be the fullback is actually going to block the player who's lined up against the center. The center will kind of just block him a little bit, then move up to block 56, a linebacker. You also have the right guard blocking another linebacker. Fournette kind of just runs in that area. And Fournette sort of fakes as though it's going to be a little bit further to the left side of the screen. So, there is an opening right here. He has to move over. So this isn't necessarily a super easy play, but you do ideally want to try and get as close to the middle as possible, and perhaps even a little bit closer to the left than the right. And the reason for this is because 51, the linebacker, he's already getting engaged right there, whereas 56, he still has a little bit more room to move around. And so he could easily move to the left side of the screen. So for Fournette, you want to make sure that you get as close to 51 as possible without 51 being able to bring you down, because you want to try to shoot through this gap if possible and get to that second level. However, he instead moves pretty far to the right, gets tackled by that player. Also, kind of the line moved a little bit too, and he didn't really adjust to it. Is this a nitpick? Yeah, but I think that you see enough of these plays that it is worth mentioning. Also worth mentioning, though, he falls forward and still picks up a really big gain on that one. So, he is the kind of guy who he does fall forward. He can be very good in open space. He doesn't accelerate as quickly as you would like, so that's the real thing. But do I think that he's a top 32 running back in the NFL? I do. And I think this is a great move for Tampa Bay to say, you know what, we're going to get someone who, worst case scenario, is still a pretty solid halfback, and best case scenario is a generational talent. That's his upside. That's why he was drafted so high in college. I've heard a lot of people say things like, well, Mitchell Trubisky was, obviously mocked by the Bears, but the Jaguars should get mocked just as much because they went after Leonard Fournette, and he was a bust, and he went before like Christian McCaffrey and also Patrick Mahomes. And I think it's fair to say, like, hey, maybe they should have gone quarterback there. They shouldn't have trusted Blake Bortles. And you can make an argument that if they do get Deshaun Watson with that pick, that maybe this is a completely different Jaguars team than one that's just completely rebuilding. I think that is totally fair to say. But if you were going to go halfback that year, there's no doubt about it that everyone thought that Leonard Fournette was going to be the superstar. I know that, 99% of people did. There was no reason to think that he wouldn't be a superstar. Most Panthers fans were saying, I wish we got Fournette, but I guess I'll take McCaffrey. That's what everyone was saying. And no one knew that Watson and Mahomes were going to be so much better than any quarterbacks that went out in the next draft class. So I think it's a bit of revisionist history to blame the Jaguars too much for this. I think getting rid of him is a bit curious. I don't really know why they do that. They might just be tanking, which, hey, that's football. Sometimes you got to tank. But I like this move a lot from Tampa Bay's perspective. So that's what I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. What is your thoughts on this move? And, of course, as always, thanks for watching.